Hey friends, my name is Z and you're watching MakesItEasy, and welcome to a new video for IGCSE Business Studies playlist. And today we have 1.2, which is a classification of businesses. And by the end of the lesson, you should be able to describe 1.2.1, which is business activities in terms of primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. And 1.2.2, which is the classified business enterprises between private sector and public sector in the mixed economy. So check out the description for all the timestamps. But we'll move on now to 1.2.1 business activity, primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. So here's the basis of business classification and using examples to illustrate the classification. So here are the different sectors or the industry. We have the primary industry, secondary industry, and tertiary. And primary industry is extracting raw materials directly from the earth, for example farming, fishing, and mining. And secondary industry is making of primary products into products more useful to human beings, and it includes manufacturing and assembly. For example, it could be building or food production. And tertiary industry, it could be providing services to people and businesses, for example teaching, bus drivers, and architects. And here's the relative importance of economic sectors. The three types of sectors of economy are compared by the percentage of the country's total number of workers employed in each sector, and the value of the output of goods and services and the proportion of this is of total national output. And here's the difference between developing and developed countries. In developing countries, or LEDCs, less economically developed country, primary industries such as farming and mining employ many more people than manufacturing or service industries, and people are still living in rural areas in developing countries with low incomes, and there is little demand for services such as transport, hotels, and insurance. So here we have a graph right here, and it's not in the IGCSE business specification, but it's in the geography specification, so it's a good knowledge to have. And we call this graph a Clark-Fisher model. And you see there's the different lines. There's a faint yellow line over here, which shows secondary. The red line shows primary. The yellow line shows secondary. The purple line shows tertiary, and the blue line over here shows quaternary industry. And quaternary is like research and development. And it's divided into three different sections: pre-industrial, industrial, and post-industrial. And pre-industrial is mostly for LEDCs, less economically developed country. And as you can see, as I mentioned here just now, the primary industry is the most sector that employs the most people. And for the industrial areas, for MEDCs, for more economically developed country, there starts to be a fall in the primary industry and a rise in the secondary industry as well as the tertiary, depending on the stage. And in the post-industrial, for the very developed countries, or the HEDC, there's more of the tertiary sector, very little primary, medium secondary industry, and the growth of quaternary industries starts to grow as they go into the research and development as their technology increases, like the United States or Japan. Then we have reasons for the changing importance of business classification. So here's the changes in sector importance. The decline in the manufacturing or secondary sector is called deindustrialization. This happens when the country is in the industrialization period. And as we go back just now, industrial when it passes, which is right here, the post-industrial. And here are the reasons for changes in relative importance of the three sectors over time. The sources of primary products like timber, oil, and gas become depleted, like in Somalia. And most developed economies are losing competitiveness in manufacturing to newly industrialized countries. For example, the acronym BRICS, BRICS, they are the five major emerging economies, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And as a country's total wealth increases and living standards rise, consumers tend to spend a higher proportion of their incomes on services like travel or restaurants. And the reason for this is because they have more disposable income as they have higher salaries and they demand more and more. Then we have the classifying 1.2.2, classifying business enterprise in the mixed economy. And here's classifying business enterprises between private sector and public sector. And the mixed economy, nearly every country in the world has a mixed economy with private and public sector. And basically the private sector is businesses not owned by government, and they make their own decisions about what to produce, how it should be produced, and what price should be charged for it as they aim to make a profit. Even so, there are likely to be some government controls over these decisions, and these are explained in later chapters in this book or video or playlist. In public sector, the government or the state own and control businesses or organizations. The government or the public sector authority make decisions about what to produce and how much to charge consumer. Some goods and services are provided free of charge to the consumer, like state health or education services. And the money from these come from the taxpayers, and the main objective of private sector and public sector businesses are often different. And here are some recent changes. In recent years, many governments have changed the balance between the private and the public sector in their economies by selling some public sectors to private sector businesses. And this is called privatization, like turning from public to private. For example, water supply, electricity supply, and public transport system. And governments claim that the private sectors are more efficient than public sector businesses to manage these, like right here. And the other reasons may be also the main objective is profit, and therefore costs must be controlled. And private sector owners might invest more capital into the business than the government can afford, creating competition between private sector's businesses to help improve the product quality. And lastly, here's some key terms for 1.2 classification of business. We have the primary sector, and the primary sector extracts and uses the natural resources from the earth to produce a raw material used by other businesses. The secondary sector of industry manufactures goods using the raw materials provided by the primary sector. The tertiary sector of production provides services to the consumers and the other sectors of the industry. Deindustrialization is when it occurs when there's a decline in the importance of the secondary or the manufacturing sector of the industry in a country. And mixed economy is where a mixed economy has both private sector and the public or the state sector. And capital is the money invested into the business by the owners. And that's it for this video for 1.2 classification of business for IGCSE Business Studies. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and found it helpful. And if you did, please leave a like and subscribe and comment down below if you have any questions or criticisms. And also check out my Instagram in the description for more daily content and more daily story posts. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, stay safe and happy learning.